What do you make of what you saw in Davos last week?
You make it sound like I went there. I've been checking for my invite all week, refreshing my inbox, and it hasn't come. I don't know if you've got yours this year, but we seem to have missed out. Look, I just reflecting on all of that, I'm feeling a bit triggered after watching all of that. The woman with the hat, Al Gore, John Kerry, it is all such nonsense. Like, it really is nonsense. It's all a great big theme park. And in fact, they actually turned Davos into what is basically a globalist theme park, changing the shop fronts, putting up, big corporate signs. It's like the griftiest place on earth. It really is something to behold. And, I heard it described during the week as being an exercise in trying to dehumanise us by digitisation. And, this concept of control, it all looks quite sort of normal from the outset. People in suits standing around talking. It's like every terrible corporate strategic planning day you've ever been to, but it looks relatively normal. But in truth, what we're being told is exactly what you said in your editorial, that we know what's good for you. You don't know what's good for you, but we do, luckily. And they even refer to themselves in those terms, in that language. I think somebody last year used the term, we elites.
Elites and special people with John Kerry. Yeah. I have to disagree with you, Senator, though, in one point. There's nothing normal about this. These people are not normal.
I said it looked normal. I didn't say it was normal.
Okay, I stand corrected. Let's go through some of the particular parts of it. In particular, I want to talk about Tony Blair's comments on a digital vaccination database. Have a listen to this.
You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
All right, Senator, you've been talking about the perils of vaccine passports. They've belled the cat here, saying they essentially want a global register. We've heard them talk before about, in order to travel, you'll have to comply with whatever jabs they want to throw out. What are the dangers in this?
Well, I mean, this is really the thrust of the whole exercise, hasn't it? It's been climate change and pandemics, and they really are the emergency trigger points that we're seeing now. And this is modern globalist politics now. It's using the emergency as a Trojan horse for control, really, I think. That's my view. And I think we are seeing that now. In fact, the World Health Organization, at a strangely coincidental time, are actually now working on amendments to the international health regulations, which are going to basically brick in control, from top-down control on countries in their own pandemic responses. So this business about a digital ID, about surveillance, about digital passports and this sort of global health platform is, I think, becoming very clearly the plan. And we are seeing that now being openly stated by people like Tony Blair and others. This is about control, Corey. This is really about billionaires telling millionaires how to make us feel.
Yeah, and I think you're quite right. They're saying the quiet bit out loud, and yet mainstream media doesn't want to report the truth because that fits with an agenda of big business or whatever the case may be. Hence, they've centralised command and control of the digital information that's coming out of Davos. But sometimes things do slip through. One of them was an EU official talking about illegal hate speech laws that may be coming to the United States, which has enshrined freedom of speech. I don't know how that's coming. Have a look at this.
We need the people who understand the language and the case law in the country, because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the US. I think that we have a strong reason why we have this in the criminal law.
All right, so it's a bit of a coincidence. You've got them talking about hate speech laws, and they're most concerned about it because it goes against their interests. Basically, if you say something that the global elites or the gatekeepers don't like, you're reporting things they don't want you to report, it can be deemed hate speech and you can be cancelled or targeted.
And this is really the future that we're looking at now. And I've been talking about it for quite a while now, and I think these things are starting to come to play. You've now got a world where you are being watched more than you've ever been watched before, surveilled, if you will, be it online, be it on the streets, surveillance cameras and facial recognition technology. There is going to come a time where we follow that path. I'm fearful that
the time is here.
It's here. It's here already.
Well, New South Wales just released their new hate crime campaign. Right? It's just extraordinary. These cartoons where they've got every assailant in it, every egregious act is, perpetrated by some white bloke, and the victims are all victims of hate crimes. Is it just coincidence that they launched this stuff when it's been pushed internationally?
It's all seemed to come at the same time, hasn't it? We're seeing it rolled out in the same. We've seen that before. We've seen that with all of these things. We saw it with the COVID period. Everything was kind of very orderly and uniform all throughout the world. Look, I mean, all of those things are already crimes. I mean, you know, to assault someone because of whatever reason is still an assault. And what we are seeing now, I think, is a tightening down on people's speech, freedom of speech, really. And, you know, that may seem perfectly plausible, but, you know, the question becomes, who's the arbiter of what's reasonable?
Whose rights should prevail?
Whose rights should
We've
prevail?
got a culture of rights, and someone's always has to be trampled by someone else's. The hurt feelings test, I think, is not justification for a criminal case or activity. I've got to ask you this. Parliament goes back in the first week of February or so. What do you think the big issues are going to be this year?
Oh, look, I mean, that's a crystal ball job because Labor have been simply rushing things through, as we saw in the last sitting week or the one we were called back to. So it could be anything. But look, in terms of the community, energy costs are going to be a huge issue, massive issue. We were told that wasn't going to be the case. I think there were going to be a $275 saving. It now seems to be quite the opposite. So we've got that. We've got the ever-present non-issue of the voice, which is a solution looking for a problem, something which is never, ever going to actually tackle the issues facing Indigenous communities and simply is providing us with, you know, as I said, something that's not needed because we already have it. We already have a lot of Aboriginal people in Parliament, which, of course, is a good thing. So I think those issues will come up. The one that I'm really, really, really concerned about, the sleeping issue, that I think is more important than all of those, maybe, arguably, is this digital ID legislation, which I think will come back. I don't know that. But
that's the one where you need a licence to be on the internet, effectively.
Pretty much. Where the one where Australians will be given a digital ID under the guise of joining up government services at the moment, things that are already out there. And of course, Corey, the good news is it's going to be voluntary, and everything always stays voluntary, as we know. So nothing to worry about at all, but I'm very worried about that.
Yeah, and I think you should be, and I think everyone at home should be too. We'll keep an eye on it all through this year. Thank you for joining me on the first show for 2023.
Thank you for having me.
Senator Alex Antic.